Hi, and welcome to the American Songbooks Conversation Series. My name is Scott Coulter, and I'm thrilled to be here today with The Wizard and I, a conversation with Stephen Schwartz. And that is exactly what this is. It's a chance to talk with the brilliant, legendary, iconic composer, Stephen Schwartz himself.
Yeah, hey, Scott.
Yeah,
good
I'm
to
so
see
glad.
you.
You too. I'm so happy to be here.
Look, no masks.
And no masks.
I know
Yes,
we're
we should address
fully
that.
vaxxed. We are fully vaxxed.
I think this series is usually done on a YouTube sort of thing, Zoom screens. But since we're all fully vaxxed, we thought we'd try something different. And so
according to the CDC, we can do this.
Yes,
and we're still socially distant.
We are.
So it's
we are
okay.
socially distant.
Right.
And it's so funny because I think the last time I saw you was in this very apartment. I had come to ask your permission for 2 projects, which you generously gave me, and I said about working, and you went about. And then the world sort of changed. Everything changed. So my first question is, what have you been doing during quarantine?
Lately, I've actually been more productive and more creative. But I have to confess that I had a really hard time last summer. And initially I thought, I'm going to have all this time. I'm just going to write. And I had a few friends who infuriatingly told me they were doing exactly that. And I could not bring myself to write anything. I just had such a lack of motivation and energy, not from being sick, just from the whole situation. And it really wasn't until kind of this past fall, in October, that I started gearing up again. It helped I had a specific deadline because the sequel to Enchanted has come up. And so Alan Menken and I have been working on songs for that. And simply to have a specific assignment and a deadline helped. And then I have to tell the truth, the November election helped me.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know how depressed I was and until the election went the way it did, and I just felt like this
fog
huge...
lifted.
That's a great way of putting it. A fog lifted, I felt.
And I think that your experience is not unique. I mean, I think a lot of people went through that. I think the people that really had these bursts of creativities were sort of the anomalies. It's like, where is that coming from? Because I think the planet, we as a society, I think we sort of needed to pull back. And I think... I know so many people have the same story as you. Like the first year or so of it was really sort of, wow, just I can't get motivated. And I do find that surprising coming from you because it struck me that I am right now the age that you were when I met you. And I feel like such a slacker. Because when I met you, you had already won a Drama Desk Award for directing, 3 Academy Awards, 3 Grammy Awards. You were already a legendary songwriter. And it's extraordinary to think that you did all of that at such a young age. And I think about the fact that, 1971 was Godspell, right?
50 years ago.
50 years ago. 1972, next year, will be 50 years for Pippin. Godspell and the Mass were the same year.
Yeah.
So you spent your summer here and your fall there. What was that like? And how did that come about?
I was so young. I was 23 years old. And I was more or less just out of college. I was only 3 years out of college. And I just thought that's how it worked. And of course, one has boundless energy, and I had boundless ambition, at that time. So it's just, you're so set on and so anxious to somehow get into the game, if you will, that when something goes by you and it's like grabbing a brass ring as your horse comes by, you just grab for it. And a lot of times you miss. And, I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time for Godspell and get offered the chance to write the score for that show. And then because of Godspell, when Leonard Bernstein was struggling to complete the Mass for the opening of the Kennedy Center later that year, my agent, Shirley Bernstein, was his sister, and so she let him know about me and brought him down to see Godspell, and that's how that came about. So as often happens with careers, you need to get through that first door,
right, and
then things can grow from there.
Right. That's such a great wise point. You're so full of wise statements like that. But it's you. 23, you graduated. How old were you when you started college?
I was 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm a baby boomer.
I know, but I know when you were born, and I know that you graduated high school, and I was like, he graduated high school at 16 years old.
Well, there were so many of us, and the public schools, just were not equipped to handle the volume of students, and so one of the things they did was skip some people if they felt they could move them through the system faster. And so I and a couple of people I know, including a guy who became my best friend, we skipped from the middle of fifth grade into sixth grade.
Wow.
And then, so I graduated at 16. I was in college when I was 16 years old.
Unbelievable.
It was weird.
I bet it was. And Pippin started in college.
That's correct.
It's not the Pippin that ultimately ended up on Broadway. It's completely
not at
different.
all.
Completely different. But right out of school was I think the first thing was Butterflies Are Free. How did that come about?
Well, to go back to the fact that I co-wrote this show when I went to Carnegie Mellon University, and I was a drama major there, but extracurricularly, there was a club called Scotch and Soda, of course, such a collegiate name, and they put on an original student-written, produced, directed, everything musical every year. And I had signed up when I first got to Carnegie and was fortunate enough to be selected to co-write the show starting my freshman year. And then my junior year, with a friend of mine from school named Ron Strauss, Ron had come across a paragraph in a history textbook about the son of Charlemagne who tried to overthrow his father. And, it was a time when drama students just loved The Lion in Winter and all the medieval melodrama. So we thought this would be a cool musical. And together we wrote this. And then through a whole series of events I won't bore you with, when I graduated, although Ron let go of the show, I came to New York and was kind of hawking it around. And through that, I wound up securing an agent. I already mentioned her, Shirley Bernstein. And she took me around to record companies and producers, et cetera. I got a job at RCA Records. And also, she represented the actor Keir Delay. And Keir was appearing in a show in Summerstock. This was back in 1969. I was 21 years old.
That's unbelievable.
And it was about a folk singer. It was called Butterflies Are Free. It was about a blind young man who has aspirations of being a folk singer, and they needed a folk song that he had purportedly composed, and that Keir, who wasn't really a singer, could sing. And Shirley asked me if I would, submit something on spec, another brass ring to grab at.
Yeah.
And so I did, and I got the job. And so that was my first, official time I had a song on Broadway. I was paid the princely sum of $25 a week.
Oh, fantastic.
Royalty for that
And were you able to leave RCA at that time?
Not yet, no. I left right before Godspell after 2 years, not because just because that my time had sort of run its course there, and it really wasn't what I wanted to do, and I wasn't really doing for them what they wanted me to do, and so we sort of mutually parted ways. And I remember being, a little bit terrified that I was leaving a job with absolutely no prospects. And this was in March of 1971, and I remember sort of my grim and worried birthday at my parents' house. Oh gosh, what am I going to do? And the phone rang, and it was someone asking me if I would come from the Lansbury Bureau office, saying, "Would you come to the Café La Mama tomorrow? There's this show there called Godspell, and we think it has commercial possibilities, but we think it needs a score, and would you like to come see it and maybe see if you want to write the songs?"
Those phone calls are so fortuitous, right? When the
my
phone
gosh,
rings
I
throughout a
know.
life, because you have a couple of stories like that. I
Yeah,
know when the phone rings.
I have been in the right place at the right time a couple
Right.
of times. And I think that's, so much of having a career in this business is luck. These random things of you just happen to be there when so-and-so called, you just happen to get cast on this television show, which then became a huge success. And it's just, I think you need to be able to show up when the opportunity presents itself. What's that phrase about preparation meets opportunity?
Right.
And you do need to have the preparation. And you listen, no denying it. I think you need to have some talent to be able to deliver. But I know a lot of songwriters that I consider, frankly, at least as, if not more talented than I, who just didn't get the same opportunities that I got.
I totally agree. I also would say, though, that you are what we now call a hyphenate. Like, now these kids have to be able to do everything. And you do that. You went to school, you got a BFA in drama.
Yeah.
Did you study to be an actor?
No, I was a directing major.
Major.
I never wanted to be an actor. And I'm just a terrible actor. I'm way too self-conscious.
But you're a fabulous director.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for saying that.
a creator of projects.
Thanks.
And a composer of projects and a lyricist. So there are songwriters who just do one thing. But the fact, I think, that you could do so many things, at least early in your career, really served you well. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think for me, it's all about storytelling. Just that I like to tell stories, and I have things to say, I guess, or things I feel that I want to say, and through characters and these stories, and then how you tell that story in conjunction with the collaborators that are assembled for a particular project. It can, for me, it's usually through song, music and lyrics, or just lyrics. But sometimes, particularly before my son Scott came along, who's a far better director than I ever was, and is now the official director in the family. But sometimes it was through directing as well. But I always try to be and like to be involved in the creation of the whole story. And, I take input from other collaborators and offer it for whatever it's worth to my collaborators. And together we're telling this story.
Yeah, it's a joint project, which makes it ultimately more successful.
Well, I don't know. Listen, sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. For me, it makes it more fun. But I really love collaboration, and I've gotten to like it more and more the longer my career has gone on.
So again, May 71 is Godspell. That fall of 71 is Mass. And then 72 is Pippin.
Right.
So when did you start work on Pippin with Bob Fosse? When did he come on board for that?
We actually, Godspell was on because he knew of Godspell and was a fan. And that's why he agreed to meet with me and, considered directing this show that I think seemed very strange to him. And so I was actually in California for, I think, either the LA company of Godspell, or else I was out there working with Lenny, with Leonard Bernstein on Mass. And Stuart Ostro, the producer of Pippin, set up a meeting for me with Bob Fosse, and I went to, I think, the studio where he was editing Cabaret, and played him some songs, and we talked, and he signed on. And, that was, I was going to say it was a mixed blessing, but it wasn't. It was a blessing. It was a blessing, even though I had a lot of difficulty working with Bob. I found it very challenging. But in the end, we wouldn't have Pippin if it hadn't been for Bob.
You're working with Leonard Bernstein and Bob Fosse at the same time. It's it's mind-blowing. Really, and I don't know how someone at that age is prepared for that, because I know you have to be prepared. You have to grab the brass ring, but that's a lot of pressure.
Well,
prestige,
I mean, I was a pretty arrogant kid, and I didn't really question. I don't think I really got what was going on. I just was kind of out there doing it. Obviously, I knew because Leonard Bernstein was one of my, musical heroes, and I was very influenced by his composing, and of course, I knew his conducting. So it wasn't as if I wasn't in awe of him, but part of me just always, jumped into the deep end, and. That sort of overconfidence served me well in some ways and not so well in others. But it certainly, allowed me to work with Lenny and Bob and people like that without being intimidated.
And then next was the Magic Show.
And then Magic Show, yeah, in 74.
And Magic Show and Pippin both ran just under 2,000 performances.
That's correct, yeah.
Like I think 1920 and 1944, something like that.
Something like that,
Very
yeah,
close.
yeah.
And so
Which is what? That's like almost 5 years, just a little shy of 5 years. Yeah.
And there are 5 composers who have had 2 shows run more than 1,000 performances on Broadway. Andrew Lloyd Webber, Alan Menken, Richard Rodgers, Jerry Herman, and Stephen Schwartz. Right?
And now, I just thought of someone else now. Lin-Manuel.
Lin-Manuel.
Yeah, because
How
in
long
the
did
Heights,
run?
I think in the Heights, well, maybe it didn't, I don't remember. I don't follow that ran, 1,321.
Right.
I used to, when I was a kid, longing to be a theater composer, I memorized how long all these shows had run.
Right.
And I, would make up my little shows and then pretend that it ran 1,326, something. I could recite to you, that Fiddler on the Roof ran 3,224. I knew all those statistics, but
fun.
I don't anymore.
They're fun to know. But I will say...
It's like baseball, you know everybody's batting average.
Right. When Magic Show was 74, and then Godspell moved to Broadway in 76. Right? Correct?
Right, yes.
And at that point, you became the youngest person to ever have 3 shows on Broadway at the same time.
Right.
And only the second person in history. Jerry Herman being the first, and then you were right after.
I guess
amazing.
Since that time, Andrew's had 4.
Yes,
Andrew
it's
Lloyd
happened.
Webber's had
but
4.
I'm saying that's amazing. I mean, really. And you were what at that 26?
I was 26, yeah.
I mean, come on. That's unbelievable. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at all anymore. I guess Andrew Lloyd Webber, you said, now has 4.
Well, everything runs so long
Yes,
now.
yes, but
In
it
those
didn't back
days,
then.
if you had a show that ran, 3 years, if you had a show run 1,000 performances, that was astonishing.
Right.
But now, look at Wicked.
Right.
Shows just run. It's a whole different business because it's so reliant on tourists.
Right.
And Broadway is so much about a brand, and then people come from overseas and they have to go see Phantom or they have to go see Chicago, et cetera,
Right.
and then the
It's
shows
all-
just
the
run
business has
forever.
changed.
Yeah.
I think about Wicked, which I've known you pre-Wicked, and was around for some of the first times Defying Gravity was ever performed as a song, and there's that great story that Debbie Gravitt tells about that woman at the concert. Remember?
Oh yeah.
She sang Defying Gravity. It was this new show from this new show that you were working on.
And no one had heard the song.
Nobody had heard
right,
the song
exactly.
or of the show. And this woman comes up to her and says, "That song you sang, Defying Gravity, now you know what menopause is like." I always think of that story. It's so funny. But it changed the world, that song. It really, I know it changed your world, but I think it actually changed the world. Looking at the list of, in my opinion, the greatest theater songs ever written, it's the only show-stopping show tune, let me clarify that, with the exception of I Am What I Am, that is about taking control and taking the power. I mean, we always talk about the I want songs. Like there's characters always have an I want song. But this is a moment where she's like, I don't want, I'm doing. And she's going to defy gravity, and she flies. And that is so empowering. And do you recognize the importance of that?
Anecdotal stories about how the song has empowered individuals, because I get emails or letters from people. And so I have these wonderful stories from, I think especially of two of them. A woman from, I think she was in Arkansas, and she was in an abusive marriage. She had 2 kids, and she wasn't working, and she felt trapped in this abusive marriage. And she heard the song, someone played her the album or something, and she left her marriage. And she took her kids and she moved to Tennessee and lived with a cousin and got a job and changed her whole life. And then she wrote to me to tell me about this. You can imagine as a writer how that makes you feel. And then also a young man who was at an evangelical school in New Jersey, I forget which one it was, and wanted to start, he was gay, and he wanted to start a gay-straight alliance. And of course, the school said he couldn't do that. And then he came into town and he saw Wicked, and he went back and he sued the school.
Wow.
And he won. And so, and of course he let me know that, seeing that song. So, and then I guess maybe the broader thing is that, and Winnie Hulsman, with whom I wrote Wicked, and I weren't deliberately, we didn't say like, let's do a show about female empowerment. Right. We were just telling, again, storytelling. We were just telling the story that was compelling to both of us with these 2 women, Elphaba and Glinda, whom we loved, and characters who were compelling to us and their relationship and friendship. But something about that and that moment, defying gravity, and also where Glinda winds up at the end, seemed to come at a cultural moment where women were starting to feel like we have to own our power. And the show came to bolster that and in some ways stand for it.
100%. I mean, isn't it just astonishing to think of what it did? Like from the days of putting it together. I mean, we all knew that it was going to be successful, but it's like a mega blockbuster smash hit.
Well, there's a difference between hits and phenomena.
Yeah.
And, a hit show, a lot of things have to go right for it. But in the end, mostly the show has to be good and appeal to some segment of the audience in some way. But then there are shows which happen at a certain period of time, at a cultural moment, where the zeitgeist is just aligned with that show, and then they become phenomena. Hamilton is a phenomenon.
Right.
Wicked became a phenomenon. My first show, Godspell, became a phenomenon. And it's not that their shows are all that much better than other shows which are just hits, but they're just, again, they're in the right place at the right time.
Right. One thing that makes me sad is I think of Wicked as this little story between 2 girls.
It is. That's the way we thought of it.
It's a tiny little thing, which has then been expanded sort of visually to fill that theater. That's the biggest house on Broadway, right? The huge stage. And it's so spectacular to watch. It's like jaw-dropping spectacle, when you see it. And in my head, I keep thinking, I can't wait, for the revival of Wicked, when someone pares it down and it's just these 2,
on chairs.
Yeah,
in
right,
a tiny theater.
And then I'm like, but that's never going to happen because the show's never going to close, so it will never be revived.
Well, there'll be other productions sneaking around.
I just, the connection between those 2 characters is so wonderful. and life-changing for both of them.
Well, I do want to praise our director, Joe Mantello, who was very aware of what you were saying, Scott, and he was very careful in the way the show was designed and in the way he staged the show, that when you needed to get in and be intimate with just these two women, that you could do it, that they wouldn't be swamped by the spectacle of it all. Right now we're working on the movie,
right?
And it's interesting because talking with our film director John Chu, he has the same exact point of view that Joe did. That essentially it's an intimate story about these two women, and even though of course the movie's going to be very spectacular and special effects and Oz and all that stuff that's going to make it fun, in the end it is this love story, really, between these two women, and he very, very much wants to make sure that it's focused that way.
I can't wait to see it. And now, did I read this incorrectly? Are you a co-writer of the film?
Well, I'm doing the music and lyrics again.
But are you helping with the script at all?
Well, it's just what I told you about collaboration earlier. Right. I mean, I'm not writing dialogue. I don't expect to, do that, nor be credited in, but all of us, Winnie and I and John Chu, we all are working together, and I'm sure as the team expands, that will happen, and we all will have input into each other's work, and that's again, it's collaboration, but there's a gestalt thing that happens, where the whole is greater than each of the individual parts. Right. Something about when you get in a room with a bunch of other smart people, if everybody is open to the experience of collaboration and not precious about this was my idea and it has to be my way or the highway, and it's just the best idea in the room wins, then something really miraculous and exhilarating can happen.
The magic can happen. Now, you don't have to, I don't want you to give everything away. You wouldn't, but will there be departures from the show at all? Or will it stick pretty close?
Yeah, well, it's a movie. So, yes, there definitely will be.
Because one of the things I really loved about Wicked, the musical, and the book of the musical, was that Gregory Maguire's novel, I loved that. I think I read it way before Wicked was even a thought, even in your head. But I love the way the musical ties the story of the Wizard of Oz together. Like it makes sense chronologically. Like that Dorothy's in this tower. That the way that they bring back the Scarecrow, the way that is all tied in. That there's a Scarecrow and a
that was important to me.
Yeah,
that was something I really cared about. I've always, and I've said this before, been grateful to Gregory Maguire, who wrote the novel, for his generosity in letting Winnie and me just take it and tell our own story. And one of the things that was really important to me, because Gregory had done some of it, but not as much as we wound up doing in the show, was how all the iconic things that we know from The Wizard of Oz, what's their origin myth? Right. How come she has that black hat, and what are those ruby slippers anyway? Right. And who is that Tin Man? And all that stuff was very important to me. I'm a mystery fan, and a Harry Potter fan, and fans of that kind of writing where there are clues laid out for you, and then and in the best writing, as in Harry Potter or Agatha Christie, the clues are right in plain sight, and then you get to the end, and if they've done it well, you're surprised, but that it's been fair play. You were played fair with, if that's a word. Yeah.
And I so appreciate the fact it's a show that you can see again and again, because then you do pick up those clues that were sort of laid out for you. And one that I'm particularly fond of is dancing through life. The whole idea that
I guess everybody's seen it by now. I was going to say it's a spoiler.
So. I won't spoil it then.
Okay.
But the way that song works, like when you first hear it, you're like, oh, what a great song. And on hindsight, you're like, oh,
There are a lot of little
really
Easter eggs in there.
Yeah, little Easter eggs in there. I never even thought about the fact that someone might not have seen Wicked.
I know we had.
Get yourself to a theater as soon as you can.
Well, I mean, we'll be back, I guess, when theaters are back. But we had to be so careful about spoilers and just ask people, please don't give these away when you.
Isn't that something though? Even 20 years. Well, I guess it's like Rosebud. If someone's never seen Citizen Kane, you don't know
what it is, and I'm not going to say what it is right now.
Yeah. Yes. Excellent.
But it's great every now and then when I go to visit the show and certain things happen and I hear people gasp around me that they didn't know that was going to happen. It just, 17 years later or whatever, it just feels fantastic.
Yeah, what a gift to be able to change lives. And I mentioned Defying Gravity as sort of an iconic song, and I think the musical theater song, I say perhaps of all time, because just like you said, the letters you got from people and how it has affected their lives. But I have been on the road with you where we would do concerts and afterwards we would sit at a table, you would sign CDs, and there would be an hour-long line of people waiting to talk to you, to tell you how your music had changed their life or gotten them through, and I'm going to cry, a really tough time. Godspell was a biggie. Pippin. Some of this was pre-Wicked. Godspell, Pippin, When You Believe from Prince of Egypt. Colors of the Wind. I mean, people would tell you stories about how it lifted them through an illness or through the loss of a friend or family member, or how it was such a comfort to you. And I was always struck by the fact that you listened to each of those stories as if you'd never heard it before.
Well, I hadn't heard that particular story. And, why does one become a writer? I think there's a need to express oneself. There are all sorts of neurotic reasons. But I think there's also the desire to communicate with one's fellow human beings. And so when you learn that something you've done actually has achieved that, has actually communicated with someone and been enlightening or inspiring or helpful or whatever, to me, that is the greatest gift that an audience person can give to a writer, is just us knowing that we're not just putting that stuff out there for our own, for our own benefit and satisfaction, that we are communicating.
And the beautiful thing about that is often the artist tells the composer, but you listen in a way and respond in a way that lets those people know you heard it and it affected you, which I think is not always the case with all creators of any kind. And that's a really beautiful thing about you.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I really remain incredibly grateful. I'm aware of how fortunate I am that I got to do for my whole life what I got to follow my bliss. I got to do the thing that when I was a kid I longed to do, and I've been given the gift of being able to do it. And it hasn't always been easy, and there have been times when I wanted to quit and did quit for a little while. But, in retrospect and on balance, I'm really aware of how fortunate I am, and I have that with me at all times. So when I'm hearing from someone, even if it's the 20th person in that line who's told me about how important Pippin was to him or her, each time I feel this enormous gratitude for it.
That's wonderful. I mean, gratitude is the key. I mean, really, to everything in life, gratitude. Yeah. Gratitude is the key. Do you have a favorite? I think I know this answer. Leonard Bernstein had a favorite song of yours.
He did, yes, I know.
Which was Lion Tamer.
Lion Tamer, yes, because it was in 7.
Right. And for a long time, you had a favorite song, which may have changed.
Well, I'm not going to reveal that.
Okay.
I'm not going to reveal those in public. I can tell you because you're my friend.
Well, for a while, you had a favorite song. And I thought the interesting thing was that they were it was similar because that particular song had a time thing involved with it, which I thought was sort of cool. Do you have a favorite song of others? Or you can list several?
I have lots of favorite songs, lots of them. but there is one that has gone through all time. Well, not, since I first heard it, and I would say still remains my favorite song, and it's Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that song changed my life.
Yeah.
In many ways.
And the thing about that song is it sounds different to me at different points in your life.
Sure.
You hear it in such a different way, which is
again, she wrote that when she was so young.
Yeah.
How on earth did she know that?
Well, see, now that's what I say about you.
It's just like the wisdom of, Joni Mitchell.
And the wisdom of Stephen Schwartz, because I will say, of all your songs, the one that really makes me go, how did he know that? He was 20-something when he wrote No Time at All.
A lot of people have said that to me.
It is the most brilliant lyric, and I mean, it makes me want to cry now. Like, it's just, but how did he know that? And the line, here's a secret I never have told. Maybe you'll understand why. I believe if I refuse to grow old, I will stay young till I die. I mean, or I can stay young till I die. I don't want to misquote you, but
it's like being an actor, writing for characters. Unlike Joni Mitchell, who writes about herself, maybe more, as brilliantly as anyone's ever written about him or herself. But when you're writing for the theater, like an actor, you need to inhabit the character, and you need to be looking out at the world through the character's eyes, and that's something. Well, you talked about being an outsider. I think I always did feel that way. And to some extent still do, And so I think when you sort of are growing up that way, you're watching other people and you're sort of trying to figure out how they tick and how they work. And, sometimes it's so you can imitate them and try and fit in. But you do develop a kind of empathy. And I think empathy is really important. Well, of course, it's important for our world. That's what's missing from our world and our country right now. But as a writer, it's vital. So I think I just imagine myself, I had a grandmother. I just sort of became her and wrote the song from her point of view.
It's so brilliant. I mean, it's like a show-stopping up-tempo song with a message that gets you. I mean, it's just a perfect song. And I still don't know how you did it. It's one thing to have empathy. It's another thing to have that wisdom. Like you said, Joni Mitchell had. I mean, the way you're impressed with the wisdom that she had to write that song is the way I feel about the wisdom you had to write No Time at All. I just think it's just beautiful and perfect, and it makes me so happy. And I had never seen Pippin. Of course, I loved the score. I had auditioned for Pippin. I was cast as Pippin once, but didn't do it. But had never seen it until the revival. And the ending of the revival is slightly changed from the original.
From the Broadway, yeah.
And I think I've told you this, but I went with my husband, Dave, and at the end, I've already cried 3 times in this interview. So, at the end of Pippin, I was I was an emotional mess. And I'm clapping and crying. And Dave turns to me and says, "Are you crying?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Why?" And I was like, and that's what I love about theater. Everybody takes something different from it. And he had the greatest time. He loved it so much, but it didn't hit him the way it hit me, which that's why I love to go see things with him, because afterwards we talk about it. And I love that moment. "Are you crying?" "Yeah." "Why?" It's just, I can't believe it. Were you thrilled with that production?
I loved it. Oh. I just loved it. I was so happy with it. And I loved Diane Paulus, who directed it. I loved working with her. And I felt of course, Roger Herson, who wrote the book, and I did some work on the show. Some stuff that we'd always wanted to do, some that had sort of been done over the years, but had never been on Broadway before. But I felt, that whereas I had my problems with the original Broadway production, I really felt this represented everything I wanted from the show.
Yeah, I thought it was just, it was so stunningly beautiful. And everyone did an incredible job. But I was particularly blown away by the work of Rachel Bay Jones.
Rachel Bay Jones. Oh my God.
I was like,
Yeah.
that
was a
performance,
miraculous
yes,
performance.
I will
Yeah.
never,
Yeah.
for the rest of my life, forget that performance. You could feel the energy in the theater shift when she came on. It was. I get the chills right now just thinking about it. But it was such a gift to be able to see it and to do that. Now, we talked earlier a little bit about, the phone rang early in like around 71, and they asked you to come down to La Mama and see Godspell. The phone rang again in the late 80s, early 90s, when you had decided to maybe pursue something else.
Yeah. That was like 1992, I guess. And I had been working over in England and hadn't had the best time. And, things weren't really working out that well anymore in my career. That's something I should say, that you talked about like this gigantic early success, which I'll own. But then there was a lot of time where things weren't working and shows were not succeeding, even shows that now have become, successful shows such as Working and Children of Eden were not initially successful. And that was very discouraging for me, particularly those two shows, which I loved so and represented so much of who I am as a human being, that the initial rejection of those shows felt like a personal rejection to me. And finally, I thought, well, maybe it's time to do something else. And I was pursuing my psychology career, et cetera. And I was going to become a therapist. And then I got this phone call from the Disney company. And they asked me about the possibility of collaborating with Alan Menken, whom I knew personally and was a friend of mine. But because his longtime collaborator, Howard Ashman, of course, had passed away due to AIDS. And so they were looking for a collaborator for Alan. And that phone call changed my life too. Yeah. And so, I jumped in and suddenly was in the movies. Yeah. It never occurred to me I was going to do movies.
Right.
And suddenly there I was.
And the moral of the story is answer the phone.
Yeah.
I never answer the phone.
Too.
Just say yes, of course. Yeah. But people don't answer the phone anymore. Do you ever get anyone that picks up when you call? It's all like text me or email me, but answer the phone. But no, say yes. That has sort of been my motto always. Say yes, because if you don't say yes, someone else will. And that's your chance. That's your chance to grab the brass ring.
Brass ring. Yeah.
But the reason I brought it up now is because I think during this particular quarantine period, a lot of people who do what we do, a lot of people in the arts world, have gone to Plan B, have shifted their focus, and I wonder what the arts world is going to look like when we come back. Like, will the players have changed at all? Will there be people that are gone that have found something else?
That's a good question. That probably, yeah, probably.
And I thought of your story in particular because you were sort of it wasn't a quarantine moment, but you were at a moment where I'm going to try this other thing, and but then the magic happens. Sort of when you let go of everything else.
I'm still sort of sorry I didn't become a therapist. I still, in an alternate universe, I think I'm doing that.
Oh, but you are a therapist. You don't think?
Thank you. But
your music is therapy to people. And even, the back and forth you have with these people that you meet that tell you their stories, that's a kind of therapy. So, but I'm sure that you must have, what would that have been like to have been a therapist? And can you imagine, going to have therapy with Stephen Schwartz? Like, I'd be like, what? Do you know what I'm saying? Like that, I wonder if that would, to have a famous person.
Oh, that's interesting. I never even thought of that. And at that point, I wasn't that famous anymore.
Are you kidding me? Godspell, Pippin.
Well, I guess.
Magic Show.
I still meet lots of people who have. That's one of the nice things, first of all, about being a writer. And it's the nice thing about having the name Stephen Schwartz, which is, like being John Smith. So many people have that name. I meet lots and lots of people who have no idea what I do. It's really nice.
That's cool. And Speaking of other Stephen Schwartz, can we tell the story? Like when you went to see Hedwig? I love the story.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you went to see Hedwig.
Yeah, well, because the writer of Hedwig, wonderful songwriter named Stephen, well, his real name is Stephen Schwartz, but because there was a Stephen Schwartz, he took his partner's name and became Stephen Trask.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you got it. You had the best of the deal. That's a much better name.
I love that story. So we talked about gratitude a little bit earlier, and which is something that I practice daily, and I know you practice daily. And you have a song about that very thing, I think, about in an interesting way that gratitude comes. And I think of it as, your signature song. Would you sing it?
I would. Yes, this is a song not from any show or anything. I will give credit that it was written for my friend Cass Morgan, the wonderful singer, for a show that she was doing. So I guess it is kind of from a show, but it so expresses something that's so, that's just a journey that I've definitely taken in my life. And I do kind of think of it a bit as certainly one of my signature songs. So anyway, here it is. I have served a full life sentence as a prisoner of my past, as a victim of a victim of a victim. It seems my parents' left traps that held me fast, and they still catch me even when I think I've licked them. Well, I have blamed them, I have fought them, but I never understood. All they really did was did the best they could. Is there a way to rise above if I look at them with love? Though I look at them full honest in the face, can I make my peace at last with the pieces of my past and enfold them in forgiveness's embrace, and enfold them in forgiveness's embrace? I forgive poor flawed parents for the things they could not be. I forgive my valiant lovers for not completing me. And the hardest thing of all now, I forgive myself the sin of not being all I planned and all I thought I could have been. But there's an alchemy in time, transforms each grief and loss and scar into the precious stuff of who we are. And there's a way to rise above if I look at them with love, though I don't deny that harm has taken place. I can make my peace at last with the pieces of my past and enfold them in forgiveness's embrace. Some call it wisdom and some just call it grace. When we make our peace at last with the pieces of the past and enfold them in forgiveness's embrace, and enfold them, I will enfold them. Now I enfold them in forgiveness's embrace. Ooh, ah.
gorgeous. Gorgeous. It's much
I
better.
have a funny story about it.
Okay.
Can I tell my
Sure.
funny story? So, because we do our shows together, that I perform this
Right.
in our shows. And one concert that we were doing on Long Island, which is where my parents live, my parents came to the show. And of course, I didn't really think about it. And so I sang this song. And afterwards, when I saw them, they came up to me and they were like, well, here we are, your poor flawed parents.
Who didn't complete you, right? That's hilarious. That's funny. I didn't know that story. Yeah, when we perform it, you stand up and perform it, and
you play it?
I play
I
it.
know,
It's
I love
much
doing
better when you play it.
It's nice
So
of
it's-
you, but I like
of
getting
course
from
it
behind
is.
the
Of
piano.
course it is. Oh, I love that story. Those shows we've done have been. It's so funny to think about them. We used to. You remember we're going to have tour jackets of the places that we've
I
been.
know,
We
all
went
the
to
tiny little towns
tiny
you
little
played.
towns.
Yeah.
Like we went to Hollister, California, and Platteville,
Arvada,
Wisconsin, and
Colorado,
Arvada,
I
Colorado.
know.
But that was what was so great, because I was like, could you imagine being a young person in one of these towns and having you come to town and share your music and your stories? It's such a gift. And the fact that you were willing to do that, again, it just speaks so highly to you. You're such a generous person in life.
Well, it was just really fun. And, I'm not a performer and I get very nervous still, but it was something I'd never done before. And, you kind of asked me to do it.
You were awesome.
And we did. So, speaking of our shows that we have done together, I think you should sing something. Would you sing something? I want you to do I did this whole arrangement just for you.
I will do that song.
Great.
I didn't want to sing, but I'll do that song. And I'll do it because it's a gift, and it's something that you've given me, which I think is something that your music gives a lot of people. But you gave me permission to be myself. You were the first person that said, you do this differently. You should do this, as opposed to trying to fit into a box. You were the first person that really gave me the permission to
I didn't know that, but I'm glad, because I love how you sing.
Thank
and
you
I
so much.
love who you are. So,
and I think that that's what your music does. And I think that that's why Defying Gravity is so powerful, because it's saying, be yourself. Take the power that makes you different and change the world. So when you first asked me to do these concerts, I think I'd met you and seen you maybe twice, and I came to your apartment, and I'm behind the piano sort of like this, and there was an Academy Award there and a Grammy Award there, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And you asked me what I wanted to sing in the show, and I said, well, I would like to sing Just Around the River Bend. And you said, well, that's a great idea. And I said, but I would like to sing it with Corner of the Sky. And you said, all right. And you went away and you came up with this.
we should say that the music for Just Around the River Bend is written by Alan Menken, lyrics and music and lyrics for Corner of the Sky by me.
What I love most about rivers is you can step in the same river twice. The water's always changing, always flowing. But people, I guess, can't live like that. We all must pay a price to be safe. We lose our chance of ever knowing what's around the river bend. Waiting just around the river bend. I walk once more just around the river bend, beyond the shore where the gulls fly free. No, what for? What I dream the day might send, just around the river bend. For me, coming for me. Every man has his daydreams, every man has his goals. People like the way dreams have of sticking to the soul. Thunderclouds have their lightning, nightingales have their song. And don't you see, I want my life to be something more than long. Rivers belong where they can ramble. Eagles belong where they can fly. I've got to be where my spirit can run free. Gotta find my corner of the sky. And maybe some misty day you'll waken to find me gone. And far away you'll hear me singing to the dawn. And you'll wonder if I'm happy there, a little more than I've been. And the answer will come back to you like laughter on the wind. I long once more just around the river bend, beyond the shore where the gulls fly free. No, no. Why do all my dreams extend just around the river bend? Just around the river bend. Eagles belong where they can fly. I've got to be where my spirit can run free. Gotta find my smoothest course, steady as the beating drum, always knowing what's to come, is all my dreaming at an end. Why do you still wait for me, dream giver? Just around the river bend. Woo!
I kind of remembered it.
Yes, you were awesome. That was fabulous. Oh, such a great arrangement.
I love hearing you do that. And
Thank
it was
you
so much fun to do
so
that arrangement.
much.
You know, you implied when we were talking about it that I went off like in my... But my memory is that we did the arrangement together, that I sort of sat at the piano and we kind of worked things out together. Then I went off and, sort of dotted some I's and crossed some T's.
We talked about a couple of thoughts, but yeah,
a couple.
Yeah, but you've always been so generous with your music and with letting people interpret it the way they want, which I think is really very cool.
No, it's exciting. You know, you write a song. I mean, I think as a song. Well, this is my feeling about as a songwriter. I know other songwriters who don't feel the same way, and they always want their songs to be performed exactly as they wrote them every single time. But I feel as if once kind of my version of a song is out there in the world, either because I've performed it or it's been performed in a show or a movie, and usually that is an indication of what I meant as a writer, then I like when people fool around with it. I discover things in the songs that I didn't even know were there that that other singers find by changing a note or changing phrasing or slowing something down or speeding something up. It reveals things to me about the songs that I wasn't aware of.
That's fabulous. And I also love about you that you, in addition to writing shows and films and stuff, you're like a singer-songwriter. You have 2 CDs.
I do, yes.
That are incredible.
Thank
you.
The
songs are... My father is particularly fond of Prestidigitation.
Oh, thank you.
That song, is there a story behind that song?
No, I had a dream. Well, there is a story, I guess. That's a pretty old song. On the, I have 2 singer-songwriter CDs, Reluctant Pilgrim and Uncharted Territory. And Prestidigitation, I think, is on the first one. I know it's on the first one, Reluctant Pilgrim. And it's a really old song. I wrote it in the 70s, I guess when I was doing the magic show and things like that. And I basically dreamt it.
Wow.
I just had this dream, and I got up, and I think it was some combination of doing the magic show and reading the Thomas Mann story, Marion the Magician.
Yeah.
And suddenly that existed, and so that doesn't usually happen to me. I don't want people to think that I write these songs, that they just come to me in my dreams. I work really, really hard.
Yeah. Such a treat to be with you. Thank you for doing this. It's just an honor always to be in your presence.
It's always great to see you.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, and we got to be together and not have to wear masks.
That's right.
So
maskless.
So the world is opening up again.
Yeah. A very big thank you to the folks at NJPAC's American Song, especially David Rodriguez and Craig Pierce for having us, as always. Thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.